afternoon. This is former Representative Ed Narain. I am here as a member of the board of the Tampa Bay Chamber Board of Directors, and I want to thank you and welcome you to tuning in to our 2020 virtual candidate forum. Today, the Tampa Chamber focuses on policy and not politics, and while we do not endorse, we want to make sure our members and members of the business community are informed on where candidates stand on the issues that are important to Bay Area businesses. Today, we're excited to have candidates for the Hillsborough County Sheriff Office with us for the position of sheriff. Today, I'd like to welcome to you Mr. Charles Boswell and Mr. Ron McMullen. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we're going to start off with a couple of questions. The format will rotate between the two. I will start with one question to Mr. Boswell, and then one to Mr. McMullen, the same question, and then we'll go back and forth. And just as a reminder to our viewers, this is not a debate, just an opportunity for you to learn where the candidates stand on the issues. So we'll start with Mr. Boswell. Can you give us a brief 60-second or less description of your campaign and what the message is that you would like voters to understand during the final stretch?
Sure. I'm the only right-wing Republican candidate that's in the race. My platform currently is integrity, conservative values, and accountability. Those are things that I plan on standing by during my tenure as sheriff. Integrity is something I plan on bringing back to the sheriff's office, and integrity encompasses making tough decisions, whether or not they're politically popular to do so. The ability to make hard decisions, even when there's an opportunity to say yes, that might be something that's politically advantageous. I know how to say no, even when it might be politically unpopular. Conservative values, what does that consist of? Love of the Constitution, love of country, love of religion, First Amendment, Second Amendment, and accountability. I'm going to make myself accountable to the people. I'm going to make myself accountable to the budget. And lastly, if they don't agree with my tenure as sheriff in 4 years, I'll make myself accountable by being voted out 4 years from now.
Thank you very much. Mr. McMullen, the same question. Can you give us a 60-second or less update on your campaign, and what message would you like to deliver to the voters in the final stretch?
I too want to bring some integrity back to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. I remember when they were a stellar department. My platform was spelled out immediately March 2nd when I signed up, and I told them this is before any of the national issues that are happening now. You could foresee it. I wanted to build and promote community relationships, and I also wanted to invest in my deputies. I wanted to stabilize or reform criminal justice and juvenile justice. And finally, I wanted to stabilize the homelessness and the mental illness issues in our community. And all of them sort of work with each other. They're sort of synchronized, they're intertwined. But the department seems like they pushed a button of self-destruction. I want to bring pride back. I want to bring, pride in the knowing the support from the community will come when you have those community relationships. And when you show that you are transparent, he keeps saying truth through transparency, and nothing is transparent. So we'll bring all that back. And just like my opponent just said, I'm going to earn your vote, and I'm going to do a good job. I think I'm the best man in the field for this, but in 4 years, if you don't think so, vote me out.
All right, thank you both very much for your opening statements. This question will go to Mr. McMullen first. What are the motivating factors in your decision to run for the sheriff's office position?
I grew up in Brandon. I moved here when I was like 13, so I've been here 43 years. Don't do the math. So 43 years. I've lived in Brandon. I graduated from Brandon High School. I went away to college. I came back. I went to the academy here, and everyone assumed that I would be a deputy. I had a lot of friends over there. My parents had a lot of friends over there. I chose TPD. For me, it was a perfect choice. I flourished. I eventually attained the rank of commander of our special operations, which is HSO's Homeland Security. And I got to do a lot of different things. I got to meet a lot of different people, but I always wanted to make, this is my home. I wanted to make it better. So I had made this decision many years ago that one day I would run, but I thought the guy in there now would do a better job than he's doing. I even supported his campaign last time, but It's just, it didn't come to be, didn't come to pass. I would have jumped in 2 years ago. I had a family issue. I couldn't, and now I did. I want to make it a better place. I want to make it better for this work. I'm not done yet. I'm still relatively young. I'm experienced, and I'm ready to move forward.
All right, great. Mr. Boswell, the same question. What are the motivating factors in your decision to run for the position of sheriff here in Hillsborough County?
Well, like Ron, I grew up in this community. I actually had four generations into this community. My grandparents, my parents, myself. I raised my family here, and my children made 4 generations. I grew up in the sheriff's office. I started that agency when I was 21 years old, and Mr. McMullen and I agree on the fact that at one time this was a very respected, very beloved agency. I was hired under Sheriff Walter C. Heinrich, beloved, respected sheriff, and sadly, we've seen this agency destroyed within the last few years. The short tenure of our current sheriff, who was appointed not so long ago. And Mr. McMullen and I both share a love of this community. He has a respect for the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. I have a love for the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. I grew up in that agency, and it breaks my heart to see that it's seeing it destroyed from within. The reasons, some of the things that led to me running were some of the missteps that I see going on right now within the sheriff's office. Gross constitutional violations being committed by a sheriff who either doesn't understand the Constitution or doesn't care about the Constitution. See a sheriff who's spending taxpayers' dollars on self-promotion, campaigning, misstep after misstep after misstep. That led to people reaching out to me and asking if I'd come back out of retirement and run for sheriff. It was a very difficult decision. It was a decision I had to enter prayerfully. It was a decision that I had to go to family members about, had to get the go ahead from my wife. And it's really encompassed with the arrest of a pastor, the release of inmates without doing background checks, grossly negligent, incompetent decisions that a leader of the sheriff's office should know better. But yet we had those things unfolding sadly in our community, and we all know the results of that. And so those were some of the motivators behind me, because I want to restore the sheriff's office to the greatness that it once was. And how does that affect the people? When you have an incompetent sheriff, you have an incompetent sheriff's office. And sadly, that's what we have right now. We have many, many, many good deputies, and many of them are as good as gold, but they're only as effective as their leadership. And if we have an ineffective leadership at the sheriff's office, then the sheriff's office is not going to perform the way that it needs to be performing. And my vision for the sheriff's office is to bring it back to the standards that it once held, including being an accredited agency, which unbelievably they are not right now.
Thank you, Mr. Boswell. And we're going to ask our candidates to try to keep the responses under 45 seconds. We're having a little bit of technical issues through this, but hopefully the viewing public doesn't notice that. So I'll give you a little bit more time, Mr. McMullen, on the next question, but we're going to start with Mr. Boswell. What do you see as the core functions of the office?
Patrol. Patrol is the core function, responding, helping citizen. That's the baseline. That's where it starts. And sadly, right now, we're drastically short of patrol deputies. I plan on having a fully staffed sheriff's office. Sheriff Cronister's answer to that was by lowering the hiring standards. I plan on increasing the hiring standards for quality deputies. I plan on filling those zones. And how does that affect the citizens? Response time. Having long response time isn't acceptable when you call 911. And I want to make sure that my deputies are there to help you when you pick up the phone to call.
Okay, same question, Mr. McMullen. What do you see as the core functions of the office? And you have a little bit more time if you'd like to elaborate on this.
Well, the function of the office is to prevent crime, crush crime, and suppress evil. That's what you're supposed to do, prevent crime. So I stated earlier in my campaign that it's woefully short-handed between 300 and 400 deputies, depending on where you're getting your information. But you have to bring the staff up. You have to have your patrol. You have to have your call takers. That's the first point of contact with citizens. And that also goes back to the mental health of the deputies. They're being overworked and underpaid. And and when you get there, I don't want a crime reporter. I want investigators. And like Mr. Boswell said earlier, we have so many talented people at the sheriff's office that are their talents are going to waste. We need people that are rested and ready and to get the job done. And when they get there, they can't have an attitude because they're so tired, they're so overworked. We need more deputies. I too will not lower the standard, but I will look further and farther if I have to get the deputies that we need for this community and for the citizens of Hillsborough County.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about trust and accountability. Mr. McMullen, how would you go about building trust, accountability, and transparency between the sheriff's office and the communities you're hoping to protect and serve?
Well, first of all, you have to be present, number one. So they will see me, they will see us, and just tell the truth. Once you're telling people, realize you're going to tell them the truth, we have to have hard conversations. Some stuff is not just black and white. And I mean that literally and figuratively, but you have to have tough conversations. You have to just tell the truth. You have to tell people where you're coming from, what your philosophy is, and how you're going to run the show. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And this is a Department of Law and Order. That's my job, law and order. So once people realize that you're absolutely upfront, that you demonstrate what you say what you mean and mean what you say, that starts building bridges and building trust amongst one another. But you can't continue to get caught into this. Oh, well, I didn't report that because that was this. Oh, well, I didn't do this because that was that. You have to be consistent and you have to be present and you have to also listen. You go to the neighborhood watch meetings, you go to these town hall meetings and listen, and then you actually respond to what the people are saying and not do this sidestepping political speak. And, I'm not good at that. You get me straight, no chaser. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Boswell, it's the same question. How would you go about building trust, accountability, and transparency between the sheriff's office and the communities you're hoping to serve and protect?
Well, I think you build trust by not just talking the talk, you have to walk the walk. Currently, we've had a situation where there was a shooting involving deputy sheriffs. And the press was able to find out a little bit about that information, but the information was very, very limited. A shooting involving deputies off duty. Deputies were actually shot in that incident. And we have a sheriff's office who's saying that it's none of the public's business knowing what went on inside that. I think that's a long way from building trust with the community. Situations like that, the sheriff's office needs to be transparent. We need to tell the truth. We need to tell the public what's going on. We need to tell the public what their funds are being spent on. And hiding that information that was funded by the taxpayers, information that the taxpayers are legally entitled to, and hiding that information isn't the way to build trust. I would argue that the way to build trust is by being open and disclosing good, bad, indifferent, not worried about political correctness. But yet we have a sheriff here who seems to be overly concerned about political correctness. How do we know that? He takes polls, literally sends out polls for decisions of public safety. Citizens aren't paid to make those decisions. The sheriff's paid to make those decisions. And he's basing those decisions on popularity contests. You cannot do that when it comes to the safety of the citizens of Hillsborough County. That is going to come to a stop under the Boswell regime.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Boswell, we'll throw the next question at you. Of all the issues that are confronting Hillsborough County, which single issue is the most important to you and why? And if elected, what would you do about it?
I think the most important issue right now in Hillsborough County is the competency of our leadership. We're seeing people in the community being affected by grossly incompetent decisions. I think that we take care of that collectively as citizens by making sure we put the right people in office. So we aren't negatively impacted by negative decisions, wrong decisions, negligent decisions, ill-advised decisions, and illegal decisions that are being made by our leaders. So right now, in my opinion, that's probably the biggest issue that we have.
Mr. McMullen, same question. Of all the issues affecting Hillsborough County, which single issue is the most important to you and why? And if elected, what would you do about it?
I also think that there's an endemic lack of leadership at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. And what one would need to do is you tell your folks you've been promoted to this rank to make decisions, starting with the sergeants. You set the tone. You have the first impact on your squad, on your deputies, and the whole point is you have to learn to make your own decisions instead of you call someone who calls someone who calls someone who calls someone, and then the last person that holds the ball is a poor decision maker, a poor leader, and you can't run a department like that. Everyone can't run a department from one person or two people over here, and you have a plethora of leaders and a plethora of talent and ability, but they're not allowed to express it or use it. So I would change the philosophy of the department, number one, but then my department would reflect the community, number two, and I'll teach them how to be leaders. They go to all these leadership classes. Clearly, they're not applying any of that.
Okay. So, Mr. McMullen, this question is going to come right back at you. Why should the people of Hillsborough County elect you as their new sheriff?
They should elect me as a new sheriff because I'm a leader. I'm a leader of men and women. I do it, and that's a talent I have. And I know that sounds a bit, but whatever. It's a fact. Everywhere, every division I go to, every unit I run, I generally get a unit citation award. We're successful. I know how to get the best out of people. I know how to treat people. I treat adults like adults. I don't have time for this petty betty stuff that's going on over there, intra-departmental, that a lot of the public has no idea about. No idea. But that won't go on with me. That never went on my squad, and it never went on my shift for long. And if it did, I got rid of the supervisors because you clearly can't do your job. And if I have to do your job, there's no reason for you to be here. So that would clean that up immediately. I know what the times call for. I know how to treat people. I know how to treat the public. I know what the public wants. Crush crime and suppress evil. That's what we're here for, not our petty betty and political stuff. It's not about me. It's about the citizens of Hillsborough County, and I'm bright enough to realize that.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Boswell, the same question. Why should the people of Hillsborough County elect you as their new sheriff?
Well, I would say that I grew up in that agency. I know it forward, backward, inside, and out. In fact, I know it every which way. I have a long history of being competent, have a long history of being successful in the sheriff's office. As a matter of fact, my clearance rate in homicides was 100%. My conviction rate in homicides was 100%. I know the dynamics of what's going on in that agency. I understand that the vast majority of those deputy sheriffs are good as gold. But I also understand that we have an administration that has some very, very serious flaws. We have an administration that doesn't understand the Constitution. They don't understand the laws. I don't even think they understand what their job is. What they're worried about is political correctness. And so what would I do to take care of that? Well, when you have a rotten orchard, you have to do away with the orchard. And I can assure you that we've got a rotten orchard when it comes to the command staff. And I can assure you that I'm going to have competent people filling those positions. And that's the way my sheriff's office is going to be handled. Competency, integrity.
Thank you, Mr. Boswell. So first question back to you. The pandemic and the related economic crisis is likely to mean millions less in funding for all public agencies. What will drive your decision-making on what does and does not get funded?
Well, I think we're going to have to look at what's important. We're going to have to take an assessment of where the money's going, where it's being allocated. Right now, I would argue that we have a top-heavy agency. Right now, I would argue that we're short on patrol. Under a Boswell administration, that's going to change. I also think part of what's funding that is we have some leadership here in Hillsborough County that's driving that economic disparity. Basic tenets of the Constitution: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. So when we address liberty, what is that? That's the freedom to live without arbitrary rules that are being imposed upon us by leaders who by the way, don't impose those very rules on themselves. Force businesses to close, force businesses to follow these arbitrary rules. As a result of that, go out of business, lose money. And what happens as a result of that? Less taxes, less funding to the police, the other services that we need. So it's a vicious cycle, and it's perpetuating. We have leaders that clearly don't understand that cycle. I would argue that how we fix that as a community is we get the right people in those positions. but the community has to do it.
Thank you. Mr. McMullen, same question. The pandemic and related economic crisis will mean millions less in funding for all public agencies. What will drive your decision making on what does and does not get funded?
Well, one would have to triage everything, much like my opponent said. You have to be efficient and effective, first of all. You cut out the fat that you don't really need or that is not effective, at all anyway. And they are a bit top heavy, but I would make sure that patrol has to stay intact. If I have to take people out of plain clothes and put them back in uniform, patrol has to stay intact because we have to have patrol. That's the backbone of any police department. That's number one. Number two, you have to look at, the programs that work, what is measurable, and keep those. The ones that don't work or that are just fluff, get rid of it. So that would also help. And the public, you have to assure the public that you're going to do whatever you can to keep them safe. You're going to do whatever it takes to keep them safe. That may mean some officers can work extra duty or a couple of extra hours. Whatever we have to do, we got to make it work. You just have to make it work. Looking at the budget, what can be cut out? What is not pertinent to our duty of preventing crime? And so that's what you just have to do.
Okay. So the toughest question that I see on this list that they've given me, and we're down to the final three, is this one. And it goes to you, Mr. McMullen, first. Name one issue in Hillsborough County that directly impacts or is directly impacted by race inequity, and explain how the county can incorporate an equity framework in addressing this issue.
I just think it's sad in 2020 that we're still talking about race. When I graduated from high school, my question, in the yearbook was like, what do you think the biggest problem is in America? And I said, it's racism. And 2020, we're still talking about the same thing. We're talking about immigration and guns. In 1982, we're still talking about the same thing. But I think one of the biggest disparities in the minds of the public is when they look at the police department, because I'm talking from a police department lane, it doesn't reflect them. So you have got to do more hiring of people so your department reflects the community that the department is within. So Hillsborough County should be reflected in your department. And that rankles people thinking, oh, they don't like me or they're against me. I'm not against anyone. Let's add people on. And that would be the easiest thing to settle everyone down. If everyone looks like me, or no one looks like me, then, oh, you don't like me every time you tell me no. So the biggest problem here in Hillsborough County, I think, is the issue with race that we're having. We have actually failed as not only a department, but our educational system, because you have a whole generation of kids that are pulling down statues of Ulysses S. Grant, Frederick Douglass, and Abraham Lincoln. So we have failed in our elementary, our middle, our junior highs, our high schools, and our colleges. If you don't know who these people are and what they did reference slavery, but you're sitting here saying one thing and then pulling every statue down, that's something else. If something offends you, I got it. But if you don't even know what offends you, you don't have the ability to articulate what has offended you, then what are you doing? What are we doing as a country? We have failed. We haven't educated our kids, or we haven't taught our officers enough to articulate what the situation is. So now you have it, and I'm not afraid to have that conversation, or that any uncomfortable conversation, because the more you talk about it, the more you get comfort and the more you get understanding. Sorry, I went over time a little bit.
All right, it's an important issue. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Boswell, same question. Name one issue in Hillsborough County that directly impacts or is directly impacted by race inequity, and explain how the county can incorporate an equity framework in addressing this issue.
Well, since Ron and I are both running for sheriff, we'll talk about what we can do within the sheriff's office. What we can do within the sheriff's office is we make sure that we have a sheriff's office that's representative of the community. That's first off. He touched on some issues of education. That's a big part of it. Of course, education brings you out of prosperity. It opens doors for you, allows you to move on in life. That's the basic tenets of who we are as a society. The right to go out and work, get a job, pursuit of happiness, again, basic tenets of the Constitution. That comes with education, being able to provide for yourself. But beyond that, beyond the education for the citizens of this county, I would argue that we also need to educate our law enforcement officers. Why did we have these riots? Why are we in the situation that we're in right now? We're having these riots and we're in the situation we're in right now because we had officers who chose to violate an individual's constitutional rights and murdering. It was a gross Eighth Amendment violation. It was an excessive use of force, led to the death of an individual. And how about the sanctity of human life? How about training officers about that, to be compassionate, respect the Constitution? So I would argue that we train our officers on constitutional law, standards that they have to uphold. We bring back accreditation so we don't see those types of things ever again. So we prevent those types of problems through education, not only of our citizens, but also the officers. We're transparent. We have to root those bad officers out. We don't cover up for them. And transparency. When they do make a misstep, when they do mess up, when they do violate the law, then we hold them accountable. We don't hide behind public information requests and not release information. We have to be transparent to build the trust, and the sheriff's office has to be representative of the community. And I think that's how we deal with all those issues in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. We're down to our final two. And Mr. Boswell, you'll start here. We've touched on several important policies today. And before we wrap up, is there a priority that maybe we didn't discuss that'll be a focus for you during your campaign and if elected?
I think I lost you for a second. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'll repeat the question. We talked about a lot of important issues. Is there an issue that we haven't touched on today that'll be central to your campaign and will be important to you if elected?
Absolutely. Accountability and proper staffing of patrol. Patrol has to be properly staffed. Without that, you have a dysfunctional sheriff's office. Sheriff's office has to be filled with competent individuals who are able to make the right decisions based on law. With that being said, an important aspect to me is we bring back accreditation with the sheriff's office. We cannot have a sheriff's office operating on a $418 million budget that doesn't have accountability. Nobody to answer to. What does accreditation mean? It means there's accountability, means there's oversight. Currently, we have a sheriff's office with a $418 million budget that's autonomous with absolutely no oversight. That means that we can have a sheriff who campaigns on taxpayers' dollar by putting his name all over the cars, all over buildings, all over bathroom signage. He can do what he wants because there's no accountability. So bringing back accreditation is paramount to returning the standards of this agency. Without that, there's no accountability. And under Charles Boswell, we're going to be accountable to the people that we serve.
Thank you. Mr. McMullen, same question. We talked a lot about important issues. Is there a priority that maybe we haven't discussed that'll be central to your campaign and to your administration if elected?
Yeah, I want to invest in my deputies. And when I say invest in the deputies, I don't mean like just give them new cars or new uniforms. I'm talking about their education. So they have the latest and greatest, like this implicit bias that Dr. Friedel from USF did with the executive staff at TPD or lieutenants and above. I want that to go through my entire department, maybe have a redo every year when they're doing in-service training to sustain that kind of knowledge. And as things get better, you get more. As we know more, you do more, and we'll do better. So as kids have implicit bias and don't even realize it. I mean, it'd be surprising. You should take the class. It's very good. Stuff like that. And we have to have the deputies. We have to get their numbers up. That's also true. It has to be done. And that will be my priority, is to get with the recruiting staff and go to these universities, FAMU, BCC, FSU, UF, FAO, FIO, USF, UT, HCC, everywhere, and also military, the military, and then get retired. There are a lot of retired cops that come down here and they're bored stiff. They got tired of fishing. You're a good cop in New York City. Come be a patrol officer here. Come join us. Let's see what you have. But again, you don't have to drop standards. But what you can do is you can also build your department with a lot of experience and knowledge. And I've said many times, I was floored when I realized Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office did not have an accreditation. How you're not accredited with that many deputies? Something happens, it shows you have a standard, your standard and accountability, just like my opponent just said. That amazes me.
Gentlemen, we're on our final question, and I want to thank you both for taking the time to meet with the chamber today. Mr. McMullen, I'm going to start with you on this last question. Where can voters go to learn more about your campaign and the issues that are probably important to them?
You can go to my, I have a website, Ron McMullen for Hillsborough County Sheriff on Facebook. And you can go there and we have a pretty substantial talk session. I do a Facebook Live every couple of weeks, every 2 or 3 weeks or so. I would like to get out of this. I'm better in person. I promise you I am. I don't know why I'm so nervous on camera, and I'm better in person. I promise you I'll answer any question you have that pertains to law enforcement. Sometimes people are asking me, should the tax base be I'm just law enforcement. Well, that's my lane, but you can get me there. And if you see any TPD officer, Tampa Police Department officer, or any deputy that I grew up with, please ask them. Just ask them about me. I'm pretty straight up. There's nothing that they won't tell you. I told all my friends, just tell the truth. I mean, none of my college friends, but just ask anyone. You can go ask anyone, and you can call me. My website has my phone number on it, and it might take a day or two to get to you because I get hundreds of emails every day. But please, Ron McMullen for sheriff.
Thank you. And Mr. Boswell, same final question. Where can those who are interested in your campaign go to find out more about it and the issues that are important to them?
I too have a website, votecharlesboswell.com. I lay out my experience in that website. I also lay out my opponent's experience, Sheriff Chronister. I'm on Facebook. My personal telephone number is listed on my website. I'm a phone call away. I'm very transparent. I'm very open, and I'll talk to anybody that wants to give me a call and ask questions.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you both for taking the time to meet with us to discuss your campaign today. And I also want to send a very big thank you on behalf of our 1,400 members here in the area and the Greater Tampa Bay Chamber's Board of Directors. We really appreciate your willingness to serve and run for office, and we wish you the best of luck. Have a great afternoon.